Yeah, what's up, everybody? Jake, how's it going, man? I got the gardener in the background. He decided this is a perfect time to cut grass. So if you guys hear me hear the weed whacker going in the background, let me know. I can mute my mic, man.
Well, at least somebody's touching grass this afternoon. I'm just on the spaces again today. I got a dongle on the way. My technical difficulties are hopefully over with by the end of this week. If you're on the OpNet team or if you're an OpNet builder, feel free to come up and join the conversation. I did send a few invites out, but we do have an open stage policy. So if you're just interested in hearing about OpNet, or you're a builder, or you just want to come talk some shit, please come join the stage. I have pinned to the top the live stream that Adam is currently on right now. We have some fans who preferred to watch the live stream. Also, I pinned the spaces. Please make sure that you repost that so that everyone can hear about what's going on here. I'm very excited for this conversation. Adam, I think this is your redemption from when we had the CBRC 20 spaces. So please don't scare everyone away this time.
I promise not to FUD bags too heavily today. We'll keep it clean today.
No, Chris and I hung out with these guys down in New York, and I hung out with them in Denver as well. Pretty stand-up guys, committed. They've been here pretty much since the beginning or the very early stages of ordinals, and we've all had our ups and downs. But as of recently, OpNet has caught a lot of attention with this new wave that they're deeming SlowFi. I have to say, I don't know if I'm a big fan of the name, but it seems to be what's caught on. So yeah. We're gonna run with it. Yeah. I sent an invite out to Chad Master. I don't know if he's going to join, or if you're the one behind the OpNet account.
I'm the one behind the OpNet account right now.
All right, brother. How you feeling today?
I'm feeling good, man. I'm feeling good. It's the early morning for me. I know it's 10:30 CST, but it's still the early morning for me. We've been pulling a lot of late nights, so I'm glad to be here, man. This is the redemption round. Hey, it's our redemption round too. It's our redemption round too. So
the redemption arc will be glorious. Let's get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's early for me too, man. At 8:30, where Chris and I am out in sunny Las Vegas. But first, let's do a little bit of a review, and then we'll dive into OpNet, because I have a ton of questions. I think everyone really does. Give us a little bit of your guys' history of building in the ordinal space, and then some of the things that you learned that led you to building OpNet.
Okay, I'll give you the super fast speed run. We'll glance over some details, but I'll give you the super fast speed run. Basically, myself and my good friend in real life, who goes by the name of Danny Plainview. Hold on, just dropped my phone. Sorry. My good friend in real life, who goes by the name of Danny Plainview. Both of us got into the ordinal space super early. And we were really bullish on the narratives that we thought would play out. We saw Bitcoin NFTs. We were waiting for something like Bitcoin tokens to come around. And then, our inevitable thesis was Bitcoin DeFi is going to kind of be the leader of the next super bull cycle. And, as things played out, as BRC20s came around, we hadn't really looked into the underlying tech stack. Neither of us are full-time developers or anything like that. So we were just bullish on the narratives. And so when BRC20s came around, we wanted to get into early Bitcoin DeFi type projects. So him and I just both bought a token called Oshi, which is an early BRC20 token. Fast forward a little bit, they were planning on building a bunch of cool stuff in the Bitcoin DeFi narrative realm. And Danny, none of them were English speakers, so Danny actually went and joined the team. Upon doing that, the long story short is he realized that they had minted a bunch of the supply and weren't building anything, and basically were just selling on the community.
Oh, and brutal, man.
Yeah, it was brutal. And I was also pretty active in the community as well. And so,
Wait, so did he like move to another part of the world to like?
Yeah. We signed a lease at an apartment here where roommates. So we signed a lease in an apartment here. And literally like a month later, he moved to France to help build this like groundbreaking tech that turns out none of it was being built.
Wow.
And they had the team had been lying to him and telling him, hey, we're doing all this stuff. Hey, communicate this all out on Spaces, write Twitter threads, all this stuff. So it was a total nightmare for him. And so he basically there's one other team member that basically was like, hey, here's what's actually going on behind the scenes, because none of them spoke English. So this team member told him what was going on. He did his research, found out, yeah, this team is just selling their tokens. So basically, and it was a really embarrassing moment for him as well, because he had talked a bunch of shit on Twitter about how everything they're building is going to be so awesome. Guess what? None of it was happening. So
Wow.
he basically made a public announcement, told the community, let everyone know, full transparency. Hey, this is what's going on with this project. I'm taking over the project. I'm going to create a new project that's actually going to fulfill the promises that have been made. But it's going to take me some time because I don't really know how to do any of this stuff. So then it went into very deep. It went into very deep research and development mode, and figuring out like how do you build smart contract type functionality with something like BRC20s. And so the answer was, BRC20 indexing, and this is a whole different conversation, but BRC20 indexing is kind of a nightmare. BRC20s are built on another layer off chain. So there's 2 layers off chain that's where BRC20 indexing lives. And BRC20 indexing still to this day is very fragmented. Anyone who's listening here who's tried to build with BRC20s knows it's basically impossible to do. So we made our own standard called CBRC20. That was what our sort of research and development led to. CBRC20 was basically the idea of it was, if we want smart contract type functionality with these types of tokens, we build the smart contract logic into the side of the indexer. And so our proof of concept for that was Moto Swap, which basically the Moto token was airdropped to all the holders of this Oshi token that the team was scamming on. And so that was the migration. Everyone who held the Oshi token had got this Moto token, except for the old team. And we got to work on this CBRC20 standard. The big problem with what we ran into as we got down the line with CBRC20 was, I think, 2 things. One, the experience and the functionality was, I would say, 2 to 5x better than BRC20, and I think that's not enough for a standard that doesn't have the push of someone like Casey, for example, who already has big mindshare in the space. That's not enough for it to be adopted. The second thing is that as we built out our entire application, smart contract logic into the indexer, we realized that this is not going to be able to scale. Like, our goal is to see Bitcoin DeFi, not just to see a Bitcoin DEX. And it creates this permissioned environment where, if someone wanted to build something, name your DeFi application that isn't a DEX, they would basically have to work with us to build it into the indexer side. And it's going to be hard to get that to be decentralized. It's going to be hard for other builders to come in and build their thing. And so we basically had to take a step back. And like in doing so, we actually got connected with a couple of really great developers who took a look at what we were doing, said, hey, and Adam actually is familiar with some of these guys because they helped with some of the Bells stuff. But those guys basically took a look at what we were doing and they said, hey, look, we can do what you guys really want to see, something basically ETH on Bitcoin, right? Is that like the basic idea of what you want to see? We're like, yeah, I mean, obviously we want to be native to Bitcoin, but we want to see a lot of the functionality that you can do of stuff you can do on Ethereum. They said, hey, we could build this. Here's sort of a spec. We looked it over. We said, okay, listen, we're probably going to have to take a step back from CBRC20. It'll probably take a little bit of extra time to develop, but this is the full vision for what the future should hold for Bitcoin. In our opinion, this is sort of our ultimate protocol design. And basically, that's the genesis of how we got to something like OpNet, which, of course, I haven't really done any explaining exactly how it works, but that's basically the full story.
Why don't you give us the kind of smooth brain top level description of what OpNet actually is? Like, how does it kind of work, and what's the goal of it?
Yeah, so basically, OpNet is effectively if the ORD client was not made for smart contracts, if the ORD client was made for if the ORD client was not made for NFTs, I just woke up, sorry. If the ORD client was not made just for NFTs, if it was built from the ground up for smart contract type functionality. So you're kind of relying on a similar abstraction of on-chain, off-chain information, same way you do with the ORD client. It's its own read-only client. But the difference is instead of putting metadata for JPEGs into Bitcoin blocks, you're effectively putting smart contracts into Bitcoin blocks through Bitcoin transactions, like smart inscriptions, you could maybe even look at them as. And then you're interacting with these smart inscriptions or smart contracts through Bitcoin transactions, like you're sending your call data to these smart contracts through Bitcoin transactions. So that's I know that's not super high level, but that's the high
pretty
level.
high level. So does it operate as it's kind of like a side chain or a separate blockchain? And like, how does that security take place on that, on the side there? How are you, I'm sure it's not decentralized now, but how would you move toward decentralized in the future? Kind of give us that loose overview of what that structure looks like.
Right. So it's not a side chain. It's not its own network by any means. It's literally like an indexer level client that is, because all of your smart contracts and all of your call data, all of your interactions are all on chain, right?
Gotcha.
And
so it's an indexer, just like Ordi is an indexer, basically.
Yeah. Again, the biggest difference is you have more execution that's done on the side of the indexer. So, but it's similar to ORD in which, like, for example, you're calling an API of one indexer when you're using any particular application or website or whatever, right? There's not a network-wide consensus mechanism. You have basically it's unlike ORD, it's deterministic. So there's basically a proof of authority network where there's a hash that's created. This is where it gets into way more technical stuff. We actually
the moment you say hash, we lose half the listeners.
Yeah, I know. Okay, I mean, again, if people don't want to dig too deep, this is covered in our light paper, but there's basically a way that if your version of the client is not reading the right information, if you're editing the database for whatever reason, it basically bricks your version of the client. So you're not allowed to give to provide a bad state. Because the state is basically all the information, all the data availability, all of the interactions are happening on chain. So there's an objective state of how things should look. And then again, all of these indexers are creating basically a hash of what the truth is. And if yours is varying from that, basically your indexer client effectively has to like resets and restarts. So that's the basics of it. There's another level of this that we can cover because I know someone asked yesterday about Wrapped Bitcoin, but we don't actually have to get into that quite yet. I'm sure there's more questions on the overall design, but yeah, that's pretty much how it works. I can go into the smart contracts on a little bit of a higher level. Basically, you deploy, obviously putting information in Bitcoin blocks is not a new thing, right? Luke Dasher was doing it with Bible verses. This is not something that is a novel concept, but what Casey really introduced was this idea of, he has basically a certain syntax, that's what ordinals are, certain format of information that if you put this certain format of information on chain, he has an indexer off chain that can recognize that. And then what he's doing is just assigning you off chain ownership of on chain data. So he's like virtualizing the Bitcoin blockchain into this sat ordering where every sat has a number. That's not how Bitcoin actually works. That's how it works on Casey's end. So he has this basically virtual level blockchain pretty much that he is creating to assign you ownership of this Bitcoin block data. Because like technically it's like, not to be degrading of what he's made, in a lot of ways it's like he designed a system for you to own a star, like you can't exactly own a star in the sky, but you could buy a piece of paper that says you do and name your star and do what you want with it, so that's sort of how ordinals work. And so our sort of abstraction of doing something like that is instead of using this virtualization of the Bitcoin blockchain for something like that, that's again, or it is an NFT protocol, and people are kind of building on top of that right now. From the ground up, we've made this a little bit easier. So when you deploy a smart contract, you basically are deploying it to a Bitcoin address. And that Bitcoin address, this gets a little in the weeds here, but that Bitcoin address is split between a SegWit address and a Taproot address. The SegWit address, the private key of that SegWit address is tweaked, so you can't access it. So pretty much the smart contract information, the inscription that you're making effectively, it's not using ORD, it's using a wider data set, but the smart contract lives in this SegWit address that has its private key tweaked. And that effectively becomes your smart contract address, because the person who deployed it can't access it. And the indexer VM recognizes that Bitcoin address as a smart contract address. So when you deploy a token, this is what you do, right? You deploy a contract to the Bitcoin blockchain that gets stored inside a Bitcoin address. When you want to make any transaction, if you want to interact with those smart contracts, you literally send your contract call data in a Bitcoin transaction to that Bitcoin address. And because the VM is recognizing that that address as like a smart contract address, it's executing whatever commands you're sending. So again, it's sort of like makes this virtual, instead of this virtualized SAT system with ordinals, it's a like sort of a virtualized EVM type environment. Again, It's not connected to the EVM, but that's sort of if we're saying ordinals is layer one, this is also the same level of abstraction.
So is this the reason it's, I guess the name SlowFi, which you guys are kind of leaning into, which is funny, but the reason it's SlowFi is because if I want to make a transaction, it's going to require a Bitcoin block to confirm the transaction, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Gotcha. Makes sense. So basically you're enabling smart contract functionality. It's just that each time I call the contract or do something on the contract is going to require a full, confirmation on Bitcoin itself.
Yeah, and just like Ethereum, you can make multi-calls and multiple contract interactions with one transaction, etc.
Yep.
But again, basically, because this is 100% Bitcoin layer one, you're completely constrained to the limitations of Bitcoin layer one. And again, the SlowFi thesis basically says there are actually some, especially when you get into the realm of DeFi, there are actually some DeFi protocols that might actually benefit from slower block time.
Yeah, it's really interesting concept, and it shows that you guys' experience with CBRC20 and some of the early ordinals projects is really being reflected through OpNet. It is in this classification that's starting to emerge of, call it SlowFi. I've seen execution environment. Some people have called it Bitcoin layer 1.5. But some of the other projects in this category would be like Track, Arc Network, and then Bitcoin OS, which we have coming on next week. Comparing, OpNet to those, you don't have to put them down or anything like that. But what type of improvements have you guys made that showcases OpNet to stand out comparative to the rest of the emerging sector?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things that, kind of one by one to give some differences. Okay, I think for one, Bitcoin OS, they kind of are trying to do this ZK rollup on chain idea. That's a little bit different. Again, I think they're trying to kind of create your first maybe more true layer two environment to Bitcoin. So this is a little bit different. Again, our entire premise, our entire idea is to do 100% Bitcoin native smart contract functionality, keep as much as we possibly can on the layer one. And so, yeah, again, kind of going into the other ones, something like Arch Network, for example, is like they have an entire verifier network. That to me is much more L1.5, if you want to say. Again, even Bob Bodley had kind of described what they're doing is this sort of side chain idea where they have a gas token that they use for this entire network of validators and verifiers, and you're basically sending PSBTs to a multisig on chain. Only half of it is trustless, and so it's a little bit more of a complicated scheme. And I think that for something like Arch, their main goal, I think, is to try and add functionality to existing Bitcoin assets like ordinals, et cetera, or maybe let's just say runes, let's just say. But the problem is, again, like these are not programmable assets to begin with. So tokens like runes or tokens like BRC20s, let's just say, this, it's the only place in crypto.
To mute his mic.
Oh, sorry
You're all
guys,
good.
forgot to mute my
Good.
mic. Yelling at my kid for interrupting my show every morning. Bro. Kid's faking
Good,
like
bro.
he's home from school, and then he comes down with his TikTok running in my grill, dude. It's like, God help me, man.
I was gonna say, I was like, man, I feel like I was giving a good explanation.
bro.
Yeah. But
When
what I
you
was
have a
saying was that-
17-year-old who doesn't pay attention to you, this is what they do. I'm sorry.
Hey,
Bro. Keep going, man.
that was me at one point for sure. So, but yeah, sorry. I was saying that basically runes or BRC20s. It's like the first time. It's the first place in anywhere in crypto where a token standard defines what you're actually able to do. On any other blockchain, a token standard is just that. It's the minimum requirements to be considered a fungible asset. Like a ERC20, for example, the ERC20s can look different from one ERC20 to the other. They can do completely different things. Obviously, if you use Ethereum, this is not news to you. But if you're not familiar with fungible assets on other blockchains, that's how they work. It's not like the ERC20 standard has certain baked-in functions. It's a minimum requirement to be considered a fungible asset, and so that's what we're introducing. I think that given the limitations, even though there's so many across the board of different standards that are out there, given the limitations of every single one of them, and we haven't seen a standard that actually functions like a normal token standard. We're introducing a new standard here that functions just like the ETH standard. So again, you'll be able to make token contracts that are completely customizable that can do any range of things that you can do on Ethereum. So obviously you have a basic token, but you also could introduce a tax token, or you can introduce a token with special functions. Again, it's quite literally limitless as to what you can do. We were just talking with a team just yesterday, actually, that they had designed a custom token contract based off of like the random example that we gave, like the standard example that we gave them, that had custom mint functions where each wallet could mint a progressively higher amount as they were minting tokens or whatever, right? And so you can have tokens that have burn functions or reflection functions, or again, pretty much you name it, you can do it. And again, so that level of programmability, in my opinion, will be the dominating thing. Again, I see less value on a personal level in trying to work very hard, because we were doing this for a long time. We were really trying to give functionality to existing assets that exist within Ord. And again, I'm not sure that Casey would co-sign this per se, but he didn't design Ord to do any of this stuff,
Right.
So, why are we trying to force everything into his creation that he didn't exactly really want us to do in the first place?
Well, this is kind of the question that I keep thinking of, right? There's so many different, protocols, L2s, they're all kind of launching, and it's like, my gut says like the best tech isn't necessarily going to win this race, right? It's like, who's going to be able to grab the mind share? Who's going to be able to grab the attention, the interest? That feels like, the one that's going to win. If there is one, maybe it's multiples, but it feels like there might just be one or two winners.
I agree.
How do you frame it in a way that, you're the one that becomes the winner? How are you guys thinking about that?
I think it's actually really easy. I agree that
I can answer that.
That the tech. Oh, Dr. J.
Yeah,
Please.
I think probably the crux of all of what we believe is mostly covered in the first page of the light paper, where we talk about what we believe the ideal quote unquote Bitcoin meta protocol should look like. Probably one of the largest rifts that people have trouble reconciling in the space right now is that not only the user experience, but the developer experience. Like it's not trivial to be developing on Bitcoin, especially if you are like a DeFi dev that has been doing stuff on ETH or Sol for God knows how long on Rust and Solidity. Now you have to deal with this foreign thing called TapScript and Bitcoin script and UTXOs. We have abstracted a lot of that. We've thought about things like, how do you make sure that, like, we had to talk to some guy who owned dozens of Bitcoin, who got his Bitcoin trapped on Unisat because it contained a single ordinal. Or not a single, I think it was like 50 actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah,
And
he sent it from Kraken or whatever sex to his Unisat or Xverse wallet, and it contained like 50 ordinals in it, and so his 44 Bitcoin was just completely locked.
Yeah, and it's these are the kinds of the complexities that occur when you have UTXO type meta protocols where everything is locked into a SAT. And so then you have two address systems like Xverse, where you have a Bitcoin address and an ordinal address. We have simplified a lot of that through the virtualization of everything into account-based token system. That is effectively like what we think one of the key differences are between us and other meta protocols. Probably another key difference is that if you're comparing us to a lot of Bitcoin layer 2s and maybe even some other Bitcoin meta protocols, I've seen several that use a gas token that is different from Bitcoin. Part of the attractiveness of having ordinals in the first place was that you didn't need to get out of Bitcoin. It used Bitcoin as much as it possibly could. And the only thing that the ordinal client was meant to do was an execution layer, where you have an indexer that detects assets that could not be on native Bitcoin. For Bitcoin natives, they don't want to get off of Bitcoin as much as possible. Like they use stables on ETH with begrudgingly because they have to, because it doesn't exist on Bitcoin. And so for at least some portion of users, they will find this a familiar environment that it's easy to understand, but also makes the user and developer experience better for them. And so in a nutshell, that's why we call OpNet the quote unquote ideal Bitcoin aligned smart contract meta protocol.
So to be clear, you guys there's no separate token, no nothing like that. Just so everybody understands the tokenomics or the lack of
literally
tokenomics.
Bitcoin.
Yeah. Literally
Bitcoin. We've had funds who've come and asked, like, how do we invest in your protocol? Literally build some shit on it, motherfucker. Go invest in the apps that build on it. And Danny often calls this the fat app thesis, where we want to give value to the people who build on the protocol. Like we're not here to accrue all the value to some governance token that just pretty much dwarfs the value of anything that could be built. We're here to give value to the Bitcoin ecosystem and the builders who want to build on it. Simple.
So Dr. J, are you a part of the OpNet team, or are you building with OpNet currently?
Anyway, Chad, back to you.
Dr. J, can you not hear me? He might be rugged.
Yeah, Dr. J has been advising our team, and he's been helping out basically since the beginning. A lot of the documentation, overall protocol design could not have been done without him. Like he's also an OG in the space, if you guys know. And so, yeah, he's been helping out our team for a long time now. And again, he's as important to the project as anybody else is. And again, he's right. Like that's our entire protocol design in a nutshell right there. I think that the one thing to highlight, obviously, besides the fact that we use just Bitcoin as gas, it's an open source protocol. There's not like a financial incentive for us to build this. The fact that we just spent our own money and funds that we had to make this a reality is because we wanted to take inspiration from Casey in the way that he made the ORD client, right? Like you guys know, because you guys have been involved with Counterparty, that NFTs on Bitcoin are not a new concept. But why did they really, really take off? Because Casey made this open source design that was aligned with Bitcoin in the way that you just had to make Bitcoin transactions and use a Bitcoin wallet. That's all you had to do. You don't have to hold any new token. You just use Bitcoin. And that's exactly the type of experience we wanted to give to not only the builder, but also the user. And then one other thing is that the ease of development it's so easy to develop on this that it makes the experience feel like you're building on a programmable blockchain like Ethereum, et cetera, even though you're just building on Bitcoin layer 1, and that ease of development drives the user experience. And so the fact is, we're a week and a half into launching a public test net without a gas token, without any incentive. There's already 30 projects that are building on Bitcoin layer 1 using OpNet. And so every single one of those projects is going to drive high value for the users. Every single one of those projects is going to accrue all of the value of the narrative of the users of building a Bitcoin layer 1 application. No value is going to go to the OpNet network because that doesn't exist. It's just a meta protocol like ordinals. You don't say I'm building on ordinals. You say I'm deploying a ordinal on layer 1. So that is why we're the most Bitcoin aligned meta protocol. And I agree with Adam too. Like, the tech is not always best. Tech doesn't always win. I think the best user experience wins. And a lot of times a great user experience is driven by a great dev experience. And so if it's easy to build applications, then it'll be really easy to build high value applications. And then those high value applications will be able to give users great experiences. Again, one wallet system, Bitcoin as gas. You don't have to know too much about actually developing on Bitcoin. You don't have to do crazy UTXO shit. You don't have to build an off-chain centralized workaround sort of solution like you do with these current standards. That's the reason why we don't see a lot of great applications that launch. Credit to the teams that are building apps right now, but a lot of these apps, even if they have a great concept, don't have a lot of users. Not to call them out or anything like that, because they've done a really good job. But Liquidium, for example, is an example, right? They have a platform that has been developed, that has users, that has a good use case, but their token has no value, and why is that the case? It's because there's not a huge demand in the market for lending in the way that they're doing it. They're doing it in the best way they can do it with the assets that they're working with. But again, there is no ability to build something that works like Aave, right? Until you have something like smart contracts and tokens that exist on smart contracts as well. That is really when you can get into full decentralized lending, full decentralized applications that are leveraging smart contracts to give a great user experience, to bring a lot of functionality to the users. And so that's sort of, I think, the future that we envision. And then again, if there's a first, name the $1 billion DeFi protocol on Ethereum or in the EVM world, there's going to be a first that protocol on Bitcoin over the course of the next couple months. And there's going to be a lot of value created for early holders, which again, why did BRC20 really take off? Not because the tech is so good. It's because it made a lot of people a lot of money early on. That's, I think, the biggest difference, I think, to the user, to the dumb user. What's good about BRC20 versus Runes? Runes didn't make a lot of people a lot of money. BRC20 made a lot of people a lot of money. That's really the biggest difference.
Yep.
It's not like, I don't think anyone really cares about the technical differences between them. In fact, the fact that you don't have to make a transfer inscription makes Runes technically much better. But BRC20 made people a lot more money because it was first. And so there's going to be a lot of new first narratives with these first applications and first protocols. There's going to be first burn tokens and first DAO tokens and all sorts of things. And so we'll see a lot of interesting narratives play out over the course of the next 6 months to a year. And so that's sort of a long answer to your question of how will we differentiate.
It's funny just because, like, as you were mentioning, the use cases or whatever, it's like there are more Bitcoin L2s and meta protocols than there are apps. Like, I don't even know of any apps. Like, show me one good app right now. Right. And
I agree.
It's like, you kind of wish the teams would build apps, but you realize where the real value creation lies. And that's where, the VCs are putting their money. And that's why, people are doing this sort of thing. It's like, it's really hard to, first of all, it's really, really hard to make a good app. Like, it's almost darn near impossible. It feels like we get one every 2 years in crypto. But to that point, how are you encouraging kind of developers to come on what you're doing and actually build?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's even harder on Bitcoin, right? Like building with the standards that we have now, where these token standards are also all of the functionality that you have. It's like, this is the way that Danny likes to put it. It's like BRC20 or runes are like they're static token contracts, and so every BRC20 token is just a fork of Ordi, or every runes token is just a fork of I don't know, whatever the first fucking rune was, uncommon goods or whatever.
Right.
There's just one contract available, and it's super basic, and that's all you can ever do. So building applications is extremely difficult. Like, also, again, like we're talking every single token, again, I think this UTXO based token model has been overhyped in this Bitcoin world, because this is the only place where your tokens are attached to little pieces. They're virtually attached, by the way, but they're attached nonetheless to little pieces of Bitcoin. Whereas on Ethereum or Solana or any other blockchain that does a lot more volume for these tokens, all these tokens are virtual tokens, so you have full programmability with these tokens, right? You're not pieces of ETH when you make an ERC20 token. They're virtual tokens that exist within the Ethereum network, and so that's what allows you to make these applications. That's what allows you to build in a totally creative way to make all these sort of decentralized applications. And we just haven't got there yet with these Bitcoin tokens. And so the biggest problem, if you're trying to build, again, we also build MotoSwap. So we wanted to build this DEX. Well, okay, a DEX, the D index is the most important part, the decentralized exchange, where there's no custody, it's totally permissionless to make LPs. Well, you can't do that with any of the existing Bitcoin assets, because of the way these Bitcoin tokens require you to work. It requires a Bitcoin address to hold these tokens, because you have to hold Bitcoin in your address. So if I wanted to make a runes DEX or a BRC20 DEX, and I know this because we tried, is I have to basically have people send me tokens to my address, and then off chain I manage the trading of these tokens, but you're giving up custody of your tokens to me. And then when I want to, you can't just make an LP. I have to support. I have to give asset support, like I'm a centralized exchange. I have to list your tokens on my off-chain order book situation, because I have to be able to recognize the tokens that you're sending to my wallet. And so what our system allows you to do is completely permissionlessly make LPs in a non-custodial fashion, because the smart contract addresses are the ones holding these virtual tokens, just like it works on Ethereum. So yeah, that's the reason why we don't see any of these applications being built on Bitcoin layer 1. And then I think that the big fault, I think the big thing that we've seen is people try to address this difficulty in building on Bitcoin layer 1, this lack of programmability on Bitcoin layer 1. They try to address it by, well, I'm just going to build a Bitcoin layer 2 that has a bunch of new functionality. It's like, well, where are the users that are using these Bitcoin layer 2s, right? Like, if you're building a Bitcoin layer 2 that has a lot of the same functionality of Ethereum, let's just say, well, where are the users for that? There's a million ETH layer 2s already. The Bitcoiners with the $1 trillion of untapped liquidity, those guys are staying on Bitcoin layer 1. They think ETH is an L2. So, who's the actual user for this stuff? I think that VCs, to be honest, have kind of gotten duped a little bit over the course of the last year and a half, where everyone's really excited about building on Bitcoin. And then you see all these random L2s pop up. There's probably 50 plus. Maybe half of them won't even launch, but all of them have done, multiple $1 million, if not $10+ million fundraises for their gas tokens or their ecosystem tokens or whatever. And where are the users for this stuff, right? Like, who's getting in early? Like, it's just a VC dump fest, to be honest, like, if I'm going to be perfectly honest about it. And I think that if we're ever going to tap into Bitcoin liquidity, we have to do this. We have to bring the games to Bitcoin layer 1. We have to give people, like Jay had sort of said, people will hold Bitcoin who maybe they think ordinals are a total scam because all you can do is NFTs. You have to give them great application use cases for them to put their Bitcoin to work. So, for example, on our DEX, right? Yeah, you can launch shitcoins. Yes, you can pair an LPs totally permissionlessly. You can launch a token, LP it, just like you do on Uniswap or Radium or whatever you want to do. But also, you can swap your Bitcoin for a stable coin that's issued on Bitcoin without having to KYC, without having to use an exchange, without having to bridge to a different chain, Like these are the types of use cases and applications that real Bitcoiners might actually really want to see. They might want to use.
Yeah, and to the point made earlier about L2s, Stacks recently came out with a tweet that was like, there's 85 Bitcoin L2s in development, which is a pretty staggering number when you think about the actual number of users that are on these chains. I'll just say, like, the incentives are really to have L2s and have a separate token, because that's where a lot of the returns come from. But I do think it's somewhat, to Chad's point, it's cart before horse, in the sense that you can't scale before you have and build for function. Like, I don't think we have even solved yet the idea of function on Bitcoin. So until you solve for function on Bitcoin, there exists less reason to scale. And I think it will become very apparent, the need to scale, once you show function. This is really what if you are a SlowFi proponent, you believe that function must first exist on Bitcoin L1 to the maximal extent possible, before there is intrinsic demand for scaling solutions. And I think that's further complicated by the idea that Bitcoin has no native bridging solutions that are trustless. And so from the perspective of the idea of unlocking $1 billion of TVL on Bitcoin, or sorry, $1 trillion of TVL, you effectively must force Bitcoiners to trust whatever it is you are using as your bridging solution to a roll-up. And I think that's the primary difference with a meta protocol on Bitcoin. At the very least, you can allow for a spectrum of level of risk tolerance. Like, if I'm a Bitcoiner and I do not want to bridge, I don't even want to use this opnet wrap Bitcoin shitcoin, whatever it is, you're very well welcome to use the PSBT system that is trustless, that is well utilized and proven. If you just want stables and you want to use a PSBT, cool. Go swap into it via the PSBT marketplace that someone else built. And then if you want to use swaps from there on, great. Then the swaps themselves are trustless, because it's now in an OP20 standard that is compatible with smart contracts. And I think that's probably the other thing that is might need some level of explanation. The whole reason to have a wrapped asset on Bitcoin is to provide compatibility with smart contracts. Like Bitcoin, I mean, if you look at the parallel Ethereum itself as the native token has no compatibility, because it was created in a time when that wasn't a thing. Like, these ERC20, 721 standards weren't in existence. I mean, CryptoPunks itself has to be wrapped into an ERC 721 because it wasn't created in that standard. And so we do this to use ETH and smart contracts. You must wrap it in wrapped Ether, and then all those swaps occur in the contract. It's pretty much the same concept. But again, if people don't want to use the wrapped Bitcoin network, or they prefer a BitGo custodied solution that someone else puts on chain, or they just want to go pure trustless and PSBTs, cool. It's a permissionless protocol. Use whatever you want to whatever risk tolerance you feel you can stomach.
Yep. I know Dave Toshi had his hand up a bit before. Are you there, man?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, a lot of my questions got answered kind of as we went along. I mean, I do have like a lot of questions, but like I'll try to narrow it down like as best as I can.
Sure.
To the ones that are perhaps like non-technical or not in the weeds. Like, I love what you guys are doing. I think it's very cool. It sounds like you're building public infrastructure in the absence of like a revenue model and a gas token. It seems to be the most like Bitcoin aligned solution that I've heard of to date, which is really interesting. I guess and I like it, but let's ask a question that kind of goes against the protocol in a way. Like, in a world where we have trustless bridging or like atomic composability, meaning that there's like some change to Bitcoin that takes place to enable those things, do you see this as just like an intermediary step until that stuff happens, or could you see it existing in a similar world? And then afterwards, if you want to answer some additional questions that I have, I mean, I'd love to. I have a couple to ask.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that I think the question, if I could reframe it, is, hey, what happens if Opcat happens, right?
Or some other reduced version. I mean, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be Opcat, like, but yeah, the idea that there is a trustless way to bridge, or there's a way to have atomic composability between Bitcoin and some other chain where that's more purpose built and has better performance, and just it's a better fit for a lot of those things. It kind of like, the idea is like, why would we have to do some of these things on L1? And like, would this just be an intermediary step if all those things existed?
Sure. I mean, again, I think that on a high level, I think that there's always going to be demand for activity on Bitcoin layer 1. I think that ordinals kind of sparked the flame, but I don't think it's going to go out anytime soon. I think that there's going to be an amount of people. I think it's going to be a wide amount of people, to be honest. I think it actually inevitably might be the majority of people are going to want to play on Bitcoin layer 1, especially those who have stayed on Bitcoin layer 1, right? Again, like, if we're talking about $1 trillion liquidity unlock, these are people who have had a million different options to put their Bitcoin to work in other places. And I simply don't think they're going to want to put that liquidity to work anywhere else but Bitcoin. And I think even getting them to put that liquidity to work on Bitcoin is going to be an uphill battle. But I think that a solution like ours is the only thing that will be acceptable to these types of people. And so that's sort of my answer on that level. I think as far as improvements to Bitcoin,
I think that I could push back on that a little bit. Like, and don't get me wrong, I really love what you guys are doing, and I do see it as being something that we are going to use very widely. But the idea that, you know, the masses or those ancient Bitcoin whales haven't woken up is because they have to bridge to an L2. Like, is that really because there's just no trustless bridge? And if you're building something which is similar to dumb contracts, they did dumb contracts on Ethereum where they built an alternative VM into the block space or into the data layer of the protocol, right? And that's basically what you guys are doing here. Like, that's not exactly Bitcoin. You use Bitcoin as a means for a gas token, but it's not Bitcoin. It's not secured by Bitcoin. It's not validated by Bitcoin. It's basically creating an alternative execution environment just within the data space of Bitcoin. So I don't know if that's like a strong enough argument to say that that's going to wake up every single Bitcoin whale. I think you understand what I'm saying here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that I don't think we'll ever touch every Bitcoin whale. I think there's an amount of Bitcoiners that will quite literally never touch their Bitcoin ever. But yeah, again, I think that when it comes to the question of bridging, I think that, again, in my conversations with these Bitcoin people, it's less that they're what the bridging solution is. I think it's much more the fact that they're using something that isn't Bitcoin layer 1 to make their transactions, et cetera. You know, again, I think that it's less of a tech conversation and more of a philosophy conversation in terms of what it feels like to the user. And again, I think the real liquidity unlock comes when you have, you know, these Bitcoin issued stables. You know, these guys are, maybe a small percentage of them are gonna, probably a larger percentage than play with ordinals, but definitely not a majority of them will be engaging in Bitcoin DeFi and lending and on-chain leverage, et cetera. But I think the real killer use case to unlock that type of liquidity is these Bitcoin L1 issued stablecoins. Like, let's just say Tether, for example, starts issuing on Bitcoin layer 1 through these types of smart contracts. I don't see a reason why a large amount of Bitcoin whales would not want to, especially given the other options. You know, these guys are not interested in moving to any other blockchain. All they're interested in is holding Bitcoin and using stable coins. You know, that's the extent of their crypto usage. And so providing that application use case within the L1 environment, I think that's really where the killer app is for those guys. You know, again, I think that there's the narrative of Bitcoin DeFi, I think, is attractive to a lot of people from EVM chains, people who are just money maxis, people who are going to come to Bitcoin because they want to launch the first $1 billion Bitcoin meme coins. There's going to be all sorts of degen type activity. And then just to keep going with your question, in terms of, future improvements to Bitcoin, we're this open source type protocol. We always have the ability to adapt and adjust once, if and when there are improvements to Bitcoin made that allow for more trustless systems to emerge, things that kind of allow you to, if there's ever any Bitcoin improvement proposal that does get passed, which I'm not a anti-OpCat person, I'm not an anti-BIP person. I want all that stuff to happen.
But I think we're both realists, like in terms of time frame and how long it may take for something like that to happen. And
exactly,
your solution is like a very good kind of like middleware, and like it may evolve because you would have like, depending on when those things are released, you may have a significant head start to improve your protocol over another one that may just be deployed. So
you took the words right out of my mouth. Exactly. Right. That's exactly it, right? We want to do this now. We want to see Bitcoin functionality now. And the fact that we can put forth standards that people use and adopt and attract developers who are building in the Bitcoin L1 eco, I think that being able to adapt and adjust our protocol as things potentially happen, if they ever do, again, I would say my most bullish estimate on something like OpCat, for example, is maybe next summer, if it happens at all, which again, I'm not saying I don't want it to happen. I'm just saying, again, to try and be a realist about it, we just don't want to sit around and wait for something to happen. We've been trying to come up with a solution that brings smart contract functionality to Bitcoin, that improves on these standards, allows you to do more stuff with them. And, we've been working and trying to figure out the best way to do it. We've put forth this sort of this protocol. And again, given that it's an open source protocol, there's always improvements to be made and adaptations that we can kind of adapt and change with the market as new technology sort of emerges. But as you said before, right, this is, in my opinion, I think it's the best solution that's out there right now for this type of stuff. And as we get standard adoption and liquidity grows and TVL grows, we'll have a little bit of a leg up. If improvements ever happen, we can always adapt to survive.
Yeah, it appears that you've foregone.
One thing I want to preface, sorry. Just want to preface, notwithstanding the conversations around like the fact that it's not mutually exclusive, that OpNet can still very much up in the air as far as temporality goes. I think there are two other pieces to consider, one of which is a philosophical question and the other which is a functional question. This philosophical one being to someone who holds Bitcoin, what level of trust assumptions is too much for them to handle or to accept, and for a lot of Bitcoiners, and like when you look at ETH, for example, you do have these, and a lot of the TVL still sits on L1. In fact, the vast majority of TVL sits on L1. And so I think that touches upon the second point, which is functional. I mean, there's a level of stickiness of capital that results from being around in the market for a while. And even as the number of ETH rollups has magnified, like multiplied in now dozens and dozens of whether it's been shipped or is in progress, all of it comes back to the stickiness of ETH L1 TVL. Even as the network activity has gone below 1 Gwei, it still stands to reason that the vast majority of TVL is still locked there. And so for something like OpNet, we don't really see it as necessarily adversarial to any rollup solution. In fact, if there's a reason to upgrade the protocol to improve throughput later, I mean, why not?
Dave, did you have a follow-up?
In my view, again, it goes back to the idea of function before scale.
Yeah, I think it's really cool, and like it's interesting that you've foregone, like there's a lot of opportunity you know, to raise, to create your own gas token, to align with miners to some degree, to align with, to sprinkle money onto builders, or like put together some kind of huge airdrop. You seem to have like foregone a lot of those shortcuts and like really tried to build some public infrastructure, which I think is like really commendable and interesting.
That's the only way I think that it can be done to get true adoption, right? Again, like just going back to counterparty versus ordinals, right? It's like the ordinals got that adoption because, as you said before, it is sort of this public infrastructure. Casey didn't inherently gain any huge advantage on a personal level, on a monetary level, from making the Ord client. He just wanted to see new functionality, and he put out his design to the world, and it was accepted because it is sort of this public infra type idea. And that's exactly the same thing that we're trying to accomplish here. You know, again, if you want to use ordinals for Casey's version of, you know, Bitcoin NFTs, there, you know, I think that there's nothing stopping people from doing that. We just want to see all of this function on Bitcoin layer 1, and this is sort of our throwing our hat into the ring and saying, hey, this is our approach. This is, you know, built for builders to give great experiences to users. And yeah, and as Jay said before, it's functioning kind of comes before everything, and it all flows, right? Like, because ETH has this high throughput, liquidity tends to, it stays on L1 the majority of it, but it tends to fragment with these layer 2 solutions. I actually think that long term, because of Bitcoin's limited throughput, you really only have about 6,000 transactions per block, and one block every 10 minutes. So as more and more applications develop and more liquidity enters the ecosystem into this smart contract world on Bitcoin, I think it'll drive huge demand for Bitcoin layer 2s, because liquidity with Bitcoin and I think future Bitcoin layer 2s, liquidity will need a flow. It'll need a place to flow, because there's a little bit of a bottleneck on layer 1 in terms of scale. So liquidity will need to flow. And that's really where I see, especially 6 months from now, 6 months to a year, et cetera, like, I think there will be high reasons why there will be a lot of Bitcoin layer 2s that kind of are compatible with the types of assets that people are playing with on layer 1. So I think there's honestly a full bull case for all Bitcoin layer 2s once you have the type of activity and functionality that OpNet gives you on layer 1. And you're right. I mean, we were offered a ton of money from a bunch of different VCs to make a gas token, to monetize this somehow. And again, we had to, you know, obviously you're dangled millions and millions of dollars. It's hard to say no to something like that, but inevitably our belief is in the fat app thesis, right? Our angle is we've wanted to see DeFi on Bitcoin since the beginning of ordinals, and we've had our idea for this DEX on Bitcoin, and our gamble is we build a great application that we can accrue value within our application, and we're on the same playing ground as everybody else, right? Our Moto Swap DEX application, the Moto token is just a revenue sharing token for our application. So there's no higher level that we operate on than any other builder operates on. And that sort of even playing field puts us, you know, it puts us, the onus on us to make a great application, a great user experience, and accrue value in our own application. And there's a high chance that an application comes out that accrues more value than us by providing, whether it's lending or a stablecoin protocol or a MakerDAO type situation that accrues a ton of value, right? Like, we want there to be the real incentive is not, hey, we're going to airdrop you our gas token if you build an application here. The real value is if you could build a great application that gives a great user experience, then that's all the incentive a builder really needs to build on a network that has so much untapped potential like Bitcoin layer 1.
I appreciate you guys building in that form, rather than taking, I think, I don't know if you guys saw it. There was a post yesterday about this one on Ethereum. It's like, you know, where the gas token is going to be Bitcoin and you're going to earn corn, the native token. I mean, I'm laughing at this, but they raised like $7 million or something. And it's like, what? You know, and, you know, so I do appreciate what you guys are trying to do, where, you know, obviously you have an advantage because you're kind of the insider, so you can build maybe some tooling or an app that will maybe win and accrue more value, but it's still open to somebody else to do the same thing. And I think that way, you know, has a real good shot, if any of these have a good shot, of attracting kind of native Bitcoin holders who really want a Bitcoin native product, right? And so I appreciate your guys' effort there.
Well, I mean, you could. Danny and I are both, we're both punks. Like that's our origins. We might also be punks in the sense of like we're punk ass motherfuckers sometimes, but but I mean, again, this is the way. I feel like that is a sort of Bitcoin aligned ideology of kind of being like, hey, fuck the current, the players who always win. Again, VCs, not as I don't hate VCs or anything. They have a role. I think the biggest value for VCs, and obviously this requires one extra step of due diligence, is invest your money in early L1 applications. That's the place to throw money at. Don't throw money at OpNet. Throw money at the applications that are using OpNet to build on layer one. That's a much more sustainable model, in my opinion. And again, like look at any of these other chains that have launched, like right, this new ETH Bitcoin L2 thing, right? Like it's a down only technology. VCs have 30% or more of the supply it's locked up, but long term they have to make their $7 million back. And I think retail, especially with the rise of meme coins, retail is wised up to the venture capital games to some degree, where I'm not going to buy. I'm also a degen. So I'm looking at what am I buying? I'm going to buy the first application token on Bitcoin at a low valuation. I might even get in on a pre-sale, or I might even get in on a free mint for one of these tokens that cost me very little money at a valuation of, under $1 million or something like that, versus buying, these guys did a giant fundraise and they're starting at a $500 million market cap. It's like, dude, I'm not buying a meme coin at a $5 million market cap, let alone, some gas token for an L2. Hell no, because where are my multiples, right? I'm going to risk, if I have $10,000 in my portfolio, I'm not going to risk my entire portfolio in hopes that it goes, 2 or 3x. A lot of people would rather spend, $1,000 on 10 promising L1 protocols and hit a 100x multiple on one of those. Again, I think that's the mindset of the average trader these days. So we want to be aligned with that.
Yeah, the system like in place currently has been like abused, but there's definitely a room for VCs. I mean, there's some things that do require additional resources to get built. Like it's not, I think like we've gone too much into like an antithesis this cycle, where it's been a little bit misguided as of late, but we'll find a healthy balance at some point. Like I just wanted to touch back on that like comfort level thing that we were talking about. Like the ultimate comfort levels that would make this feel a lot more like Bitcoin or Bitcoin native would obviously your protocol being secured in some way by Bitcoin. So that means that the economic security, which is one of the main strengths that you could lean into of Bitcoin, would be somehow securing what you're doing, some way to decentralize the indexer, maybe making it immutable in some way. Cause like, it's like if you have a POA system, who governs like upgrades, who governs how things become validated, like all of kind of those things come into question. Are those things that you've looked at when you're thinking about the longevity of this protocol?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's sort of our 6 months to a year roadmap is, obviously these indexers operate as these sort of read-only state machines. So there's this same sort of ordinal client level abstraction of decentralization where you're kind of just relying on these individualized, centralized endpoints for whatever data you're relying on. But long term, the long term goal is to move this to sort of like a proof of stake sort of system where people are able to run, you're kind of phasing out POA and moving towards a proof of stake sort of system where people are staking Bitcoin within their within validators or within their indexers. And now you have, as you sort of said before, this full decentralized system. But the first sort of step is bootstrapping value in this sort of native wrap Bitcoin solution that we have in order for it to be, again, we can't just start with proof of stake. We have to start with this POA system to start out with. And then every 3 months, we're planning consensus upgrades to add to the POA network. and inevitably we'll transition to proof of stake. Again, probably 6 months to a year down the line is our goal. And then again, there's a chance that new developments happen within Bitcoin that can help us make the system 100% trustless or 100% aligned directly with Bitcoin, secured by whether it's Bitcoin miners or however we're doing it. Again, we're trying to build this to be as future proof as possible.
Yeah, I love it. I love the idea. I mean, also perhaps like taking a look at some of the other systems that have envisioned a hub similar to what you guys have, because like effectively it's a hub whenever you're talking about like the fat application or the app chain thesis. Like those two things are kind of the same in my opinion, just depending on the underpinning technology. But yeah, and then like how they kind of evolve into pre-POA eventually anyways, just kind of like by evolution. It just kind of happens that way. I guess you learn from some of those different chains. And then also like the things that you were mentioning about like stables and other things, like I think that's really where the strength of this protocol is, like initially, like for issuance and origination, which I think are two of probably the most powerful things that you can do like on this blockchain. Those are things that you can't really do on other blockchains with the same degree of confidence. I'm very bullish and very excited. I'm glad that I joined this meeting.
Me too, man. Me too. I'm glad that you see sort of where we're coming from on a philosophical level. And again, I completely agree with you. Something like stablecoin issuance, I think that's the obvious long-term full use case of something like this that we're really trying to bring. I think there's going to be some great stablecoins that launch on Bitcoin natively. I think that as soon as there's enough incentive to, a lot of the major stablecoins will also move to issuing on Bitcoin as well, because inevitably Bitcoiners make up a large percentage of the volume done with stables. And so, then of course, obviously, maybe it's a little bit less aligned with the traditional Bitcoiner sense, but talking about on-chain leverage, this is not something that's available on Bitcoin, yet Bitcoin still has this dominating market cap. How much of Ethereum's market cap is on-chain leverage, right? A lot of it, I would honestly estimate to say. And so you can introduce this concept, the ability to either take loans out on your Bitcoin or be the counterparty and provide loans and get yield on your Bitcoin. These are things that are easy ways to either one, play with the amount of risk that you want to play with. But secondly, again, easy ways to get some yield on your Bitcoin, especially with something like an Aave type protocol. If you're the liquidity provider, you're almost always getting your yield. It's a fairly safe, I'm not going to say 100% safe, but it's a fairly safe way to get yield on your Bitcoin. And then as more lending, all these applications stack up like Legos. So as more lending protocols emerge, you can have yield aggregation, right? As more stable coins emerge, you can have something like Curve that comes out. And so there's going to be a lot of, I think, really interesting phases of how we see this DeFi on Bitcoin narrative emerge. And again, we're here for it, right? Like this is just what we've wanted to see from the beginning. And of course, we're building our application. We'll build some tooling and et cetera. But the ground is wide open, right? We want people to be able to plant their flag on the moon and say, I was the first to do this. I was the first to do that in the Bitcoin space. And if you build a great application, the value can accrue in what you've built. And just to, I know I'm speed running this, but yeah, again, VCs have a total place in the ecosystem. People need capital to build stuff. Obviously you can bootstrap using pre-sale platforms, or you could bootstrap using liquidity bootstrapping pools, or you could bootstrap using tax tokens, or whatever you want to do. But there will always be a place for venture capital money to flow. I just think that investing in early applications that provide great use cases for users that already exist, that is where I think the venture capitals will have their place, is because I think what we're seeing now is VCs funding these operations that, my question when a lot of these things pop up is who is using this? Like, who is the user that this is made for? Like, where, aside from those who are trying to airdrop hunt or whatever, where are the users, right? We saw this with, not to talk down on them, but like Merlin chain, right? Like a lot of liquidity flowed there early, and then if you look at their chart, it's down only because liquidity runs away from there as soon as the token unlocks, as soon as everyone gets their airdrops, people just leave because, again, who needs? You have to address users' needs and wants. Again, clearly with all the primitive standards that we have on Bitcoin that are so limited, there's still a massive market and a lot of interest in doing stuff on layer one. So bringing as much functionality as we possibly can to layer one, that's the focus. And again, I think venture capital will, if they'll have to do a little bit more work to find the right projects to partner with to build applications, but again, I think that the value is going to be long term for them.
What's the for guys who are interested in building with you? What's the best way for them to connect?
Well, the funny thing is, you could quite literally build something right now without even having to talk to us.
Nice.
There are applications that pop out that have been building stuff for the past week that I have no idea. We see activity on our indexer and we're like, oh, someone's doing something.
Yeah, that's the best. That's the best.
Yeah, it's awesome, and so you don't have to get in touch with us at all. But we do a lot of resources for builders. We've got a dedicated dev group where a lot of builders are in there chatting and talking and throwing ideas at each other, and it's a great place to connect with other builders and find other resources. And we also have a dedicated team of business developers as well that can aid early projects in connecting with, whether it's people who are experienced to advise or run their projects, or whether it is access to venture capital, right? Like a lot of the VCs that we talk to, we let them know, hey, listen, you can't exactly invest in OpNet, but if you stay in touch with us, you be part of our little Rolodex. We'll send you applications that we think are promising. So we have we have resources for builders as well, if that's something that people are interested in. And again, it's totally permissionless. So if you don't want to mess with us at all, if you think Danny Plainview is a big fat meanie, you can build whatever you want to do without ever having to touch our team.
All right, awesome, man. Appreciate you guys coming on. For anybody who doesn't know, Jake, myself, and Chris, we work at Emblem Vault, the leading cross-chain NFT protocol. We have a big space tomorrow, Namecoin. We finally got that migrated. Check the nest up top. Set a reminder for tomorrow, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. We will.
The OG merge miners,
bro. Yeah, I mean, this is like, love Namecoin, love the histories of all this sort of stuff. If you don't know what the heck Namecoin is, definitely come into the space tomorrow. Really the first NFTs ever in the history of crypto. So excited to finally get that across the goal line and back. So it'll be good to talk with the Namecoin community again tomorrow. And I guess we will see you all, everybody, tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. Jake, do you have anything else for us?
Not much. Just enjoyed the conversation. It's cool to see builders building on Bitcoin through their own custom way, right? There's no standards that exist on Bitcoin. So I think that brings a large amount of creativity to the scene, and also the differing opinions and the civil conversation, even with some differing opinions, I think is really awesome to have. You don't really see a lot of that happening in other ecosystems. So yeah, I really appreciate Chad Master for coming on with OpNet. And it's cool to see how people manipulate UTXOs at the end of the day so that it could fit their protocol. So yeah, I really appreciate it. Big Namecoin spaces tomorrow, the first NFTs in crypto history. So yeah, come join that out. And then we have a big slate for next week. Next Tuesday, we have on the Bitcoin OS team. On Wednesday, we have the Bitcoin Bet team. And then on Thursday, our Emblem Town Hall. So we're going to be revealing some new information there. Please make sure that everyone's following the Emblem account. We are, as Adam said, the leading cross-chain NFT tool. And we've been talking with OpNet a little bit on how we can expand there later in the year once we have our 2.0 system live, and we could bring all assets to OpNet, right? That's essentially the leading NFT bridge, so you could bring ordinals and all of these other ones over there. So we're making a lot of progress there. And also make sure you guys are following OpNet. They've been putting a lot of work in. It seems like they have a pretty devout community there as well. And that's the last things I have to say. See you guys tomorrow.
Thanks, guys. OpNet.org if you guys want to check out any of the projects that are building or get in touch with us. All of the resources are there as well. So again, thanks again, Emblem Vault guys. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, man.